Pete Wedderburn here. I'm Pete the Vet, and I've just finished doing the radio spot on the Pat Kenny Show here on Newstalk. Now, there's always a number of questions that we don't get to when we're on air, so I take this opportunity on Facebook Live to answer them afterwards. And if you've got any more questions about your pets, please just type them into the comments section, and I'll get to them in due course. So the first question.
Okay, so we are shortly moving from house to apartment. We have a 5-year-old Kern Terrier who's a bit of a barker when the doorbell rings. How do we train her not to bark in the new apartment, as it could become an issue? Many thanks.
That's quite a difficult problem because it very much becomes a habit. You'll be okay at first because your dog won't recognise the new doorbell, and so the chances are they won't start to bark. So what you should try to do is approach things in a different way. And one simple way could be that you put a notice up for people to phone you rather than pressing the doorbell. And that means your dog... The problem with the doorbell is the dog learns very quickly. Every time the doorbell rings, there's a stranger there, and they bark at strangers instinctively. So if you could instead have your phone notify you, your dog won't recognise the phone ring, won't link that to somebody being at the front door, and so you then have an opportunity to prepare the dog for a stranger being there. And what that would mean would be that you would train them to sit and stay on command, and you'd use treats and praise to do this. And so when the dog is sitting and staying, what you can then do is get somebody else to bring the stranger in, and while the stranger comes in, then the dog is still sitting and looking at you and staying, and gradually they'll become aware of the stranger being there, but they won't get as excited and bark as much. And that's a general idea as to what to do. You may discover that because the doorbell's a new doorbell, you may be able to do that anyway. But I think that the problem is that dogs are so good at learning links that if you don't do something different, they'll automatically very quickly realise doorbell, person there, bark. So try what I've suggested and see how you get on.
Our dog is a 5-year-old rescue dog. He suddenly starts snarling and biting shoes under the table at mealtime for no apparent reason. What does this mean, and how can I stop him doing this?
That's a tricky one. You're right when you say no apparent reason. There must be a reason. I'm not sure what that reason is. Possibly somebody accidentally kicked the dog one time, and the dog has simply learned to associate feet with some pain, and therefore they feel aggressive towards it. It's hard to change this, and the only way I can suggest to you really is that you start to control the dog rather than letting the dog go under the table. And I think there's a great place for so-called indoor kennels or crates, which are basically a small enclosure that you put your dog into at certain times. Some dogs begin to use them like private bedrooms almost, where they deliberately choose to go into their crate to get away from all the hubbub of the room. So what you do is you train your dog to go into the crate regularly, and you start doing this just for short periods, and you put maybe some toys in there for the dog and a comfortable bed, and put the dog in there for short periods. And once the dog is used to going in there, you would actually deliberately put the dog in there at times when they would normally be under the table, and that way you don't have this challenge. And it's one of those things that once he loses the habit, maybe he'll forget about it and won't start doing it again in due course in future years.
Okay, so we've 2 husky cross female dogs. They go crazy when we bring them to the vet, and they're impossible to hold down for injections. Do you have any tips?
That's a really difficult problem. I'm familiar with it as a vet. I suppose, again, what has worked well in the past has been deliberately choosing to take dogs to the vet clinic for no reason at all, very frequently. And I'll tell you a story about how I once saw this work really well. There was a little Westie that hated going to the vet and was always impossibly aggressive and very, very difficult to handle. That little Westie got a bad injury to his leg, and that meant that he had a wound that took about 3 months to heal. So he was then going to the vet twice a week for that long. And at first he hated it, and so what we used to do is we used to give him treats when he arrived, and the dressing of the wound wasn't any bother to him, wasn't sore at all. What happened was, over that period of time, he gradually learned, actually it's not so bad coming to the vet, and by the end of it, he was very relaxed. So you could mimic that yourself, you see. What you could do is, I think you're not going to do this, by the way, but what you could do is deliberately choose to visit the vet frequently. Just go and talk to them about this, but then what you do is you regularly, maybe twice a week, just visit the place. Nothing would happen to your dogs. They'd be given some treats, maybe they could be given a bit of affection, and they would then learn, actually, it's not so bad going to the vet after all, and then they wouldn't be as frightened. Now, I say you probably won't bother to do that because it is a lot of work for what is a problem that can be solved in other ways. And here's the other way you can be solved. You could simply go to the vet and have your dogs being given an injection of sedative when they arrive, and that way the dogs will, within 10 minutes, they'll be very easy to handle, and the vet can give an antidote afterwards, which will get them to come around quite quickly. Another alternative is you can actually give medication for 2 or 3 days before you go to the vet, and that just sort of chills the dogs out a bit. You'd have to talk to the vet about that to sort out the right kind of sedation. But these are the various options that are available anyway. It really depends on the situation as to which way you go with those.
Okay, so this comes in from Lucia. So, hi Pete, we've adopted a dog who was previously beaten by their owners and is really traumatised. She is terrified to be near most humans. Any advice on how we can help her?
It's very sad and very difficult. I think that the only answer is time, and the dog having repeated positive experiences with a range of humans, starting with yourself, and then friends of yours, and you simply have to teach people to understand dog body language, not to force themselves. You know, if she's showing signs of being stressed, just to back off and let her have her own space. Find out what motivates her, find out what she likes. So some dogs are really highly food motivated, in which case food treats are great, and you know, you can use food treats to make dogs feel that they're being rewarded. And other dogs are game or play motivated, so they would do anything to be able to play with a bouncy ball, for example. So find out what your dog loves doing, and then get strangers and friends to engage with the dog periodically, so that the dog is having positive experiences with a range of different people. And at all times, be aware that if you push it too far, if you make the dog, you know, go into a situation where it's obviously very frightened, then you're just going to make things worse. It's about increasing things gradually. It's a process called desensitization. That means getting them used to things. And counter conditioning. That means your dog's been conditioned to be frightened of people from its experiences. So counter conditioning means conditioning the dog actually to like people from good experiences. So desensitization and counter conditioning is what you need to get organised there.
Okay, so the final question's from Elaine. So I have a male Rottweiler Collie Cross pup who's 8 months and has a really intimidating bark and will bark at every other dog when walking. How do I stop this?
That again is often due to fear. Dogs bark for a reason, and especially young dogs, often they're frightened of other dogs, and the way that they react is that they try to scare off the other dog by barking, and so this often starts with puppyhood. Actually, they don't meet enough other dogs when they're very young, and so it can be quite difficult to sort out. But certainly, the idea of what you would do is somehow get your dog to mix with other dogs that it really likes and gets on with, and try to get the dog as well and as widely socialised as you possibly can in an environment where it doesn't feel threatened at all, and where it can actually just enjoy playing with the other dogs. And the idea is that over time your dog will begin to realise that these other animals and people aren't anything to be frightened of, and there's no reason to bark at them. And so over time the dog will eventually not behave in that way. I would say to you, it's quite difficult to do this kind of thing by yourself, because you know you haven't experienced this happening before, and so you're starting from scratch and learning how to deal with it. So usually it works really much better to engage with a good dog trainer or behaviourist and to work with them to sort out this sort of problem. It's very important that you do sort it out, because a dog of that type and size can be very, very intimidating for people. And even if there's no danger to people, they'll still be very frightened. And it's not a good thing to have a dog in that kind of with that sort of behaviour going on. So do take it seriously and get the help of somebody professional to get it sorted. Okay, that's it for today. We'll leave it at that, and I'll talk to you all again another time.